The Pittsburgh Steelers have made a few roster changes within the last week. So, the Steelers, they've designated one player to return off of injury reserve to their active 53-man roster. They've also released one player from their 53-man roster to open up some space, and they signed one player to their practice squad. But before I get more into it, make sure you subscribe to the channel, turn notifications for everything Pittsburgh Steelers news and updates. Also like this video. Now, let's get right back into it. So, the Pittsburgh Steelers, they're done with Week 13, and now moving over to Week 14. But before the week starts, against this matchup against the Browns, they've made some roster changes, and they've designated one player to return off of injury reserve, and that player is Trice Jr. They opened up his 21-day window a few weeks ago, and this was going to be his last week in order for him to return to the 53-man roster and for him to be activated off of injury reserve. If he was not activated this week, he would have been out for the rest of the season. He missed a lot of time with a hamstring injury, but he's finally back and healthy, and he will be available for the Pittsburgh Steelers' upcoming games to finish off the season and the playoffs. But in a corresponding move, the Pittsburgh Steelers had to waive someone from their 53-man roster to open up that roster spot for Trice Jr., and that player is Jonathan Ward. He's been on and off the Steelers' main roster and practice squad all season, and once again, he gets waived from the team to open up that roster spot for Trice Jr. So, that is the released player. The Pittsburgh Steelers have also signed a player to their practice squad. I'll get more into detail on it, but it's Julius Welshoff, an edge rusher for the Steelers. So, now that we know everything that happened, let's get into more detail with it. And let's start off with Trice Jr. being activated from injury reserve and placed on the 53-man roster. This comes at the perfect time. He's finally back healthy. He's missed a lot of games. He's been out ever since Week 3 against the Los Angeles Chargers. That was the last game he played in. He's only played in 3 games so far this season. And he's finally back, and like I said, it's coming at the perfect time because the Steelers' schedule is starting to get tough, and they're starting to need some players at the cornerback position, and Trice Jr. was playing really, really good before he went down with his hamstring injury. He got the game-sealing interception at the end of one of the games. So, Trice Jr. coming back is perfect. They're facing the Eagles soon, Chiefs soon. They're facing the Bengals with wide receivers. They're facing Jerry Jeudy this week. So, him coming back against all these wide receivers is great. Also, Zay Flowers and the Ravens. So, Trice Jr. having an extra body on the field will be amazing. So, he's been practicing. He's been trying to get back. But this was the last week for the Steelers to activate him. Like I said, if he was not activated this week, he would have been lost for the season. And that's probably why you're wondering, why didn't he get activated or return to practice earlier in the season? Well, they don't want to open up his window of practicing too early, because if they do, and then he has a setback and he gets injured again, then he'll be out for the remainder of the season if he's not activated, because you can't have an open 21-day practice window and then not activate the player after that 21 days. So that's why they probably waited and was extra cautious with something like a hamstring injury, which is a lingering issue for many players, and also just a soft tissue injury that takes a long time to heal. So that's why he was activated now and returned to practice only like 3 weeks ago. So Trice Jr. is back, and like I said, he's missing being on the field. He said this: "I missed practicing. That's really where the growth comes in that people really don't see. That's where you get better. I missed it a lot, working on my game. I've always been preparing like I was going to play week in and week out. Still the same preparation, definitely was exciting mentality to get back to practice. Whenever they call me, I've got to be ready, and I'll be ready for sure." End quote. So he's excited to get back, just like we're excited to have him back. And Trice Jr., along with Joey Porter Jr., Dante Jackson, can make a really good 3 outside wide receivers and a good rotation, because now you don't really have to use James Pierre as a third cornerback. And also, you have guys like Cameron Sutton, who's now back from his suspension, and you have Benny Bishop Jr., and this defensive back room is starting to look pretty good now, and a lot of depth as well. So Trice Jr. being back is just good all around. So enough with him. Let's talk about the waived player in Jonathan Ward. Because like I said, they waived Jonathan Ward in order to open up a roster spot for Trice Jr. And Jonathan Ward, he's a player who has sacrificed a lot this season in terms of being on and off this Pittsburgh Steelers team. Many people don't realize, but he's been on and off this team a lot, whether it's a practice squad, whether it's the main roster, because he goes from being on the main roster, just say, for example, when Cordell Patterson was injured earlier in the season, Jonathan Ward was a player that the Pittsburgh Steelers used and actually played in some of the games and got some carries and played on special teams and was on the main roster. And then a few weeks ago, when Jalen Warren, he was projected maybe he would miss a game because of his back injury, and the Steelers were cautious with that. They signed Jonathan Ward back to the main roster after he was released, after Cordell Patterson came back. So Jonathan Ward was back when Jalen Warren was dealing with his back injury. So he was on the 53-man roster, and then now he's released again. And even when he's on the practice squad, sometimes they have to open up a spot because they need to sign someone else from the practice squad, and then he's off there, on there again after he gets cleared from waivers. So he's been on and off the Steelers team just a lot and sacrificed a lot for basically players being injured and him getting a chance, and then him just sitting out games because of players being back. So Jonathan Ward, he hasn't really had a main spot on this team, but he has been someone who's on off, and obviously the Steelers really like him for they keep bringing him back and then waiving him, bringing him back, waiving him. So the Steelers, they have a spot for him on this team if something happens, and Jonathan Ward is progressing really good in terms of taking that role from the Steelers. So Jonathan Ward, he's the person who was sacrificed from the Steelers 53-man roster to get Trice Jr. back. But now let's talk about a practice squad signing. Practice squad signing will be Julius Welshoff. He was signed to the practice squad, and before I even get more into that, let me just say this. After Jonathan Ward clears waivers, more than likely he'll be on this team once again on the practice squad. So that's just something that the Steelers have been doing with Jonathan Ward. So Julius Welshoff, he's on the practice squad, and he was just signed there this past week. He was originally signed to this team as an undrafted free agent following the 2024 NFL Draft. He started at defensive end for Charlotte, but had his 2023 season cut short due to injury, playing in 4 games. He began his career at Michigan, where he played in 35 games. In 2022, he played in all 14 games. He is from Germany, and he is an international player. So when the Steelers had him on their off-season roster, one of the things with him is usually you're allowed 53 people on your roster. But if you have an international exemption for a player, in which Julius Welshoff did fall in line with, they could have had 54 people on their roster. And it doesn't count as another player on your roster. It's just an additional player that you're allowed to have. But the Steelers obviously decided not to go that way and keep him on the roster. I guess he wasn't good enough, they believe, to be on their roster. So they cut him, and he was not given that exemption anymore because he's not on the roster. But the Steelers can always take that chance if they wanted to. But Julius Welshoff, they added him back to the practice squad just this week. He's been off the team for a while, but they obviously liked what he did in training camp. They liked what he did in preseason in order to bring him back. And he's back finally. Maybe he'll get a chance if injuries continue to happen. We all see Alex Highsmith. He's been dealing with injury. He should be back this week. We see Nick Herbig deal with an injury. He's been back now. So injuries happen. Players have to get risen up from the practice squad to the main roster, and you never know when you're going to be in a game, whether that's from the practice squad to the main roster or just being elevated for just that game. So just stay ready. Julius Welshoff has been ready. He's on the practice squad right now. Maybe he'll see some game action this season. More than likely not, though. But he's back on the team and back in the NFL with the Steelers. Anyway, this is your roster update for the last 2 weeks. I never made a video like this for the previous week. So this is covering the last 2 weeks of transactions for the Pittsburgh Steelers roster updates. So let me know your thoughts down in the comments below on every move that was made from Trice Jr. being back. How do you think he'll fit into this team? And do you think he'll go back to playing the way he was playing before injury? Can he be a huge part in this team moving forward? And also, how do you feel about Jonathan Ward being the sacrificial lamb basically all season from the practice squad and the main roster? And also, how do you feel about the practice squad addition of Julius Welshoff being added back to the team? Let me know your thoughts down in the comments below about all 3 of them. And also, like I said at the beginning of the video, make sure you subscribe to this channel and turn notifications for everything Pittsburgh Steelers news, updates, highlights, analysis reports, even rumors. I cover everything Pittsburgh Steelers. I've covered all season, and as we continue on late towards the end of the season, I'll continue the playoffs, the off season as well. This is the best spot for everything Pittsburgh Steelers news, especially if you want to listen and watch and not have to read it. This is a spot for you. I'll keep you guys updated, so stay tuned. Like, comment, subscribe, turn notifications, and until next time, I'll see you guys all later. I'm out. Peace.